Alright, hello everyone, how are you all doing today? I myself am doing rather well, and it looks like that Gone with the Wind is actually put back onto HBO Max. So, when HBO Max took it down, there was a lot of speculation that it might not come back at all because these types of people just keep dragging away our history and beating it with sticks just to make it more appropriate for sensitive people of today, the sensitive people's tastes of today, and it just keeps coming back and taking more and more away from our history. But thankfully, it didn't take this away. Although there is a 4 to 5 minute video added to the front of the movie, but it can easily be skipped. I don't think they'll be adding a skip button to the little video at the front, but well, whatever, it's there now. Uh, Personally, I would just go out and buy a Blu-ray of Gone with the Wind if it's still available. I know when this first happened, they did sell out rather quickly. I don't know if any DVDs in the future will exist without that disclaimer as well. There's always putting on your pirate hat at that, anyways. Just download yourself a proper copy, and you don't have to deal with the disclaimer if it does bother you enough. So, Gone with the Wind is back on HBO Max with disclaimer that it denies horrors of slavery. The film glosses over the horrors of slavery and depicts insulting racial stereotypes, which way I would argue that it does not. It doesn't. It glosses over the slavery because the story is not about that. It is about this woman right here on the left and her journey from being rich to getting shot down with the Civil War, which financially ruined her, and her claim that she will never be hungry again, and how she undercuts her second husband to make his business financially successful by, cutting, not exactly cutting corners, but being a fierce businesswoman. I would say that even though the film is presented in sort of this glamour, no, not too, not, I wouldn't say glamorous, but there's this air of fantasy to it, really romanticized. It is a very romanticized film, but it does not actually depict any side without its faults. Even uh, once again, even though she becomes a shrewd businesswoman, she goes through 3 marriages throughout the movie. The first one just out of spite, the second one to steal his business, and the third one just because it's kind of convenient, really. And the third one does happen quickly after the death of her second husband as well. It's just insane, almost how evil and ruthless she becomes in a way, almost kind of heartless, but also kind of hopeful at the same time that she can still grow as a person by the end. Gone with the Wind has returned to HBO Max along with 2 new videos that discuss the historical context and racial stereotypes of the 1939 Civil War epic. The film was removed from streaming services earlier this month after an opinion piece written by John Ridley, screenwriter of 12 Years a Slave, arguing that it romanticized the horrors of slavery. Once again, I would say that it doesn't romanticize slavery in any way. It just isn't part of the story, and to make it a part of the story would have ruined what the story was trying to do, and that was to focus on Annabelle, the main character of the film. The film doesn't just fall short in its depictions of black people, wrote Ridley. It doesn't have to meet any sort of standard. It's not about black people. It was absolutely idiotic. It glorifies myths of the antebellum South. No, it doesn't. It clearly shows that these people are kind of in their butts most of the time, that they don't realize what they're doing and stuff of that nature. The men are excited to go to war at the beginning of the movie, and only to lose everything, really. Warner Media the film, yeah. Warner Media agrees that the criticisms and removal and remove the film, saying in a statement, "These racial depictions were wrong then and are wrong today. Only to the weak-minded and idiotic who see racism in everything." And we felt that to keep this title up without an explanation and denouncement of those depictions would be irresponsible. Basically, we've got to cover our asses. Let's make something up to please these whining, very sensitive people. It promised to return it to service later alongside additional content. The videos that have now been added include a 4 to 4.5 minute intro segment that automatically plays if you select the film, but it can be skipped, and I would hope so, for fuck's sake. And an hour-long panel discussion filmed at the TCM Classic Film Festival in 2019 and titled "The Complicated Legacy of Gone with the Wind." This can be played separately. It's kind of added into the DVD features of the streaming platform, so there are things that you can check out on the side. Thankfully, they don't just paste this thing onto the front like they did with the 5-minute video, but I still wish that they just made it an extra instead, and it would be so much easier to ignore at that point. As reported by Variety, the intro is hosted by Black film scholar Jacqueline Stewart, who described Gone with the Wind as one of the most enduringly popular films of all time, and it rightfully should be. When viewed by a mature mind, this film really does just show a person at their worst, but never gives into any despair. Like, once again, at the beginning of the film, the main character, Annabelle, is just very naive, unwitting, and just goes along with the ride. Her biggest concern is that the man she loves is being married to someone else. And this someone else is just the nicest person, so you can't really hate her in any way. Stewart says the movie was protested before it even premiered, and that its producer, David O. Selznick, was well aware that Black audiences were deeply concerned about the film's handling of the topic of slavery and its treatment of Black characters. Well, for the movie, the novel had come out and was very popular. I at least know that much. And honestly, if it was going to be very poor in its depictions, it really failed at giving poor depictions, because Hattie still won an Oscar with the supposed poor depictions of racial stereotypes. The film depicts enslaved Black people as racial stereotypes, says Stewart, servants notable for their devotion to their white masters or for their ineptitude. Three Black slaves out of the entire film. All the others leave their master behind for to be free. Only two of them really stick with her that were originally hers, and a third who was a slave to another person who doesn't really want to live a hard life, because it's the majority of black slaves who were freed didn't really know what to do with that freedom at the beginning. A lot of them ended up in shanty towns, and so if you were a house slave and you were used to that comfort, of course you would stick with your master. There is a certain sense of loyalty there too, because you were going to be treated better than the outside slaves, who in the film were nowhere to be seen by the end. Absolutely idiotic. The films depicts enslaved people. Oh, these characters include Mammy, a house servant played by Hattie McDaniel, who became the first black person to win an Oscar, but was not allowed to sit with the cast during the awards due to racial segregation. They kind of state that as if it's a point against her or against the time, but the fact is she still won an Oscar and she was still invited to the ceremony. Could you imagine if they weren't? Stewart says the film's treatment of this world through a lens of nostalgia denies the horrors of slavery, as well as its legacies of racial inequality, but argues it should still be accessible to viewers. Watching Gone with the Wind can be uncomfortable and even painful, she says, only to idiots who view the world through this racial lens. Still, it is important that classic Hollywood films are available to us in their original form for viewing and discussion. Honestly, could you imagine if they remade this film today and tried to add a 12-minute segment every little while about how slavery is bad and how it's evil? The film would be ruined. HBO Max is not alone in adding such disclaimers for certain films and TV shows. The 1941 cartoon Dumbo on Disney Plus, for example, included the disclaimer: this program is presented as originally created. It may contain outdated cultural depictions. Of which they are speaking of the crows in the film, which lots of people didn't even recognize as black. They simply thought they were these cool, jiving, singing crows and had a lot of fun with these characters. Similarly, Tom and Jerry cartoons released by Warner Home Video that are available on streaming services like Amazon carry the more explicit warning that the cartoon depicts some of the ethnic and racial prejudices that were commonplace in American society, but that to censor them would be the same as claiming these prejudices never existed. For those unfamiliar with more classic Tom and Jerry shorts, there is a woman, I don't know her name off of the top of my head, who is basically the maid of the house who takes care of the house, and she is a black woman, and she talks just like a black woman would of the time. I don't think it's racially insensitive to do so. She isn't really the main focus or anything. She's just kind of there to provide a human context and to just beat on Tom at some points. So that about does it for this video. I'd like to say again that it's absolutely insane that they're trying to claim that Gone with the Wind is racially insensitive when most of the film doesn't even care about that type of stuff. It kind of has the war go on in the background and things of that nature. It's all focusing on the main character of Annabelle as she goes through these struggles and all that. I greatly enjoyed this film. I would definitely recommend it to anybody who has interest in it, and I definitely would ignore these disclaimers because, once again, in my opinion, none of these disclaimers fit the actual narrative of the film itself. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below, maybe even leave a like, and for more videos like this, subscribe. Until next time, take care.